Guns have been flying off the shelves in Colorado, thanks to Democratic legislators.
It was like Black Friday every day.
The feds tossed the Trump administration's attempt to get private voter details on Coloradans. Denver's largest homeless shelter is struggling to get people into permanent housing. And as Next turns 10 years old this week, we look back on the day you started something brand new and changed Colorado for the better.
I don't know if anybody imagined what it could become today.
I can't believe this show is still on the air, but it's next.
Nobody is better at selling guns than Democratic lawmakers. Every time new gun control is about to take effect, people go out to buy a ton of guns. Tens of thousands of people got to gun shops ahead of Colorado's new gun control legislation. Our Mark Salinger caught up with the Coloradans working overtime to get all those background checks done.
As the calendar changed from July to August, Colorado did something that Colorado has never done before.
This was a significant increase in volume.
Nearly 60,000 people submitted applications for a background check to buy new guns in July before a new law took effect on August 1st.
Our busiest day historically for gun sales is Black Friday. During the last 2 weeks of this surge, it was like Black Friday every day.
Armando Saldate is the head of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They had to upstaff the department that runs the background checks to deal with the 195% increase in applications compared to the same month last year.
It's a very thorough and complete check, so that didn't change whatsoever, and it won't change in the future.
What did change is Senate Bill 2503. It was passed last year but went into effect on Saturday. It requires people who want to buy certain semi-automatic firearms to complete a firearms safety course and obtain a certificate through Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
I am the biggest salesman for guns in the state of Colorado.
Democratic State Senator Tom Sullivan sponsored the bill, which passed as a significantly watered-down version of the original bill. He's not surprised people raced to the gun stores before it took effect.
What this is a sign of is the acolytes of the gun industry have drank the Kool-Aid, and they are going out and buying more and more.
But at least one sheriff has already said they won't participate. In Montezuma County in far southwestern Colorado, the sheriff's office says they will not be participating in the management or issuance of the training certificates required by this law, saying the law doesn't provide funding or staffing for the sheriff's office to do this, along with several other concerns. The law requires a permit and firearm safety training to purchase certain high-powered firearms that accept detachable magazines. It also prohibits the purchase and sale of all rapid-fire conversion devices like bump stocks and binary triggers. In the past, we've seen certain sheriff's departments say they won't enforce certain rules around things like red flag laws. For now, Montezuma County is the only one that says they won't be participating, Kyle.
Mark, do we know how many guns were purchased, right? I imagine some people who were prompted to buy weren't just there for one.
Yeah, so I asked CBI how many guns, and they told me we don't know specifically, but it is 60,000 background checks that were processed. Senator Sullivan told me that he received messages from people saying, thanks for passing this law. It helped convince my wife that I could buy 3 more weapons. So there you go.
Could have been a bunch. Mark Salinger, thank you. Federal judge in Denver has rejected the Trump administration's attempts to get its hands on Coloradans' personal voter information, not the public voter data that anybody can get, name, address, party registration, more detailed information that is not public. Last year, the Department of Justice asked Colorado Secretary of State to turn over unredacted voter data, including driver's license numbers and partial Social Security numbers. The feds have made similar requests in other states. They say it is to ensure election integrity. Democratic Secretary of State Jenna Griswold refused. She said it would violate state law, and she was concerned the Trump administration would use the information for immigration enforcement. The DOJ sued, claimed the feds should be able to get the information under the Civil Rights Act. This week, a federal judge dismissed the lawsuit, found that the feds did not provide sufficient explanation for why they needed the sensitive voter data, and that those specific records are not part of the Civil Rights Act. The employee lockout drags on at the Cargill beef plant in Fort Morgan after union members voted down the company's latest contract offer last night. The lockout of the 1,700 beef plant workers started nearly 3 months ago after contract negotiations stalled. Last night, union workers voted narrowly, 749 to 724, to reject the proposed agreement. Both sides plan to continue negotiations. In the meantime, the city of Fort Morgan is struggling. It's missing out on millions of dollars in tax revenue so long as the plant is closed. One worker we spoke with today said he just wants to get back to work and have health insurance again.
The thing I'm worried about is that some people are not going to go to the doctor because they're like, I can't afford this. They're going to miss things that they probably shouldn't have because they need to go to the doctor. There's a lot of fog in the future. There's a lot of mist. We don't know where we're going, but we still have that camaraderie and group to get us through it, I think.
We don't know what the sticking point is. Neither side has disclosed details of the rejected offer. Union leaders said originally that Cargill was offering $2.50 an hour raise over 5 years. City leaders in Denver say they are really pleased with the early results of the city's new performance-based contracts for homeless shelter providers. The city's largest shelter is celebrating that it hit every metric. But that shelter saw a significant drop in the one outcome that matters most: people actually making it into permanent housing. Our Spencer Soisher is looking into the disconnect.
Denver wants to make sure its shelter providers
across all the shelters
are being held accountable, and ultimately, people are moving into permanent housing. To do that, it's trying out performance-based contracts, a pilot measuring shelters by 4 metrics. Rapid resolution, scored better if speaking with guests about options other than the shelter. Occupancy, beds full. Case management, did a case manager meet with them? And coordinated entry, the paperwork aspect.
Performance-based contracting that we have put forward is a really innovative model.
Cole Chandler runs the city's Department of Housing Stability. Earlier this year, it handed the keys to the city's largest shelter, the Aspen, to Urban Alchemy. And Urban Alchemy just aced its first test.
I'm looking at the Aspen now, and you guys have met every single metric.
The city is comparing Q2 of this year to Q2 of last year, but the Aspen's rate of getting people into permanent housing when they leave dropped from 58% to 34% year over year, a 24-point drop, the largest of any shelter in the pilot. Even with that, the city is calling this a success because they hit all the metrics.
And with the lack of federal vouchers, that becomes really difficult.
The department is blaming pulled federal housing vouchers for the drop, not the shelter.
For the last 18 months or so, we've seen a drop in investments in federal housing vouchers.
Wouldn't say there's an issue with the metric.
Urban Alchemy is cool with the performance-based contracts and the metrics. They say the permanent housing drop is an initial impact from people adjusting to a new operator.
Sometimes we're just not the right fit for everyone, and sometimes our guests are just not ready.
The metrics might get tweaked, but the city says they believe they have the right foundation for them.
We do believe that we're investing in the right inputs, and that then when we piece together the right parts of the system, like the housing vouchers, the exits to housing, that those things will add up over time. So we're happy with the metrics.
The city says it still evaluates other parts of the shelter, but those 4 metrics are what determine an extra performance payment to the organization, money on top of their regular contract. There was controversy surrounding Urban Alchemy when they took over that shelter. The organization had controversies in other cities. However, council members who seemed resistant to them then said today they're very pleased with how they're running the shelter, Kyle.
All right, some things are indisputable, Spencer, right? That visible homelessness around Denver is down incredibly compared to a couple of years ago. Also, indisputable, the city has spent a ton of money on it, right? But then you start to get into the weeds of like, what do the actual outcomes look like, which is why we're watching these metrics so carefully.
Well, and the people who are spending that money are also the ones who are deciding the grade here and how the metrics look. If everything's on a curve, like if you had a teacher and they were giving out all A's, the scale is tipped here. Right, yep, but no, that's the reason why we're watching. All right, Spencer Soisher, thank you. Bad news for all you crazy kids in Denver trying to stay at the bars until the break of dawn. I mean, not me. I'm 42. I'm not about that life. I've actually never been about that life. City Council, not about it either. They punted on a proposal to let bars close at 4 a.m. For weeks, City Council's been debating a proposal to rewrite nightlife rules. Venues with cabaret licenses, meaning they regularly host late-night live entertainment, would be expected to make some security upgrades, like having surveillance cameras and a written security plan, clear signage banning guns and dispersing crowds within 25 feet of the entrance. Under the new proposal, bars would have been allowed to stay open until 4 a.m. Last call for alcohol still would have been at 2, as required by state law. Critics said that 4 a.m. closing times might not be economically workable for bars and could make noise in neighborhoods.
Supporters said allowing longer operating hours would allow crowds to trickle out gradually rather than forcing everybody into the streets at 2 a.m., where some people choose to engage in fisticuffs or duels with pistols.
I think we're not quite there yet on data that demonstrates that things get safer with a later exit time. I think what I would be interested in is if we can somehow step our way into this, particularly with a pilot, geographic locations, like where is this actually being desired, by which sectors, and let's start a little bit more narrowly.
So that's where they left it. They might revisit this 4 a.m. closing as a smaller pilot to see how that impacts the fisticuffs and the duels with pistols. Supreme Court is going to hear arguments from communities that want to be able to sue Colorado's biggest polluters. And as Next turns 10 years old this week, we are reflecting on the good that you have done by means of some local TV news show.
What I think Word of Thanks have done is showed us what our collective power is together.
You never forget your first, so we are going back to where it all began. Next. Former Vice President Mike Pence is joining Colorado Christian University as a visiting faculty member. That school in Lakewood says Pence will be on campus monthly, giving lectures and having classroom discussions with students in the coming academic year. Pence, of course, was the target of the pro-Trump insurrectionist mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, because Pence refused to go along with the plan to overthrow democracy by overturning the election results. That plan, we should say, was developed by John Eastman, a visiting scholar at the University of Colorado. Colorado Christian University has parted ways with several MAGA figures in recent years, including former Trump attorney Jenna Ellis, who pleaded guilty to a felony for election interference case in Georgia. The Supreme Court says they will hear Boulder's case against Suncor and ExxonMobil in October, as Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser argues that the case should stay here in Colorado. In 2018, Boulder sued those oil and gas companies, arguing that companies misled the public about the dangers of climate change and that they should be responsible for covering millions of dollars in damages attributed to climate-related disasters like fires and floods. Attorneys for the energy companies have argued that any harms related to climate change should be regulated at the federal level. The High Court refused to hear the case twice, but agreed to take it in February. This week, Colorado and 18 other states filed a brief saying the Supreme Court does not have authority to hear this case because it hasn't finished with Colorado's court systems yet. The Supreme Court will decide two things: whether they have the authority to hear the case at all, and if they do, whether federal law prevents claims under state law for harms related to climate change. It wasn't the climate, but it was the weather that changed on us, Crispy Donkey, and it was so glorious to have fall for a day. Oh. I was telling you, I was outside working in the yard this morning in like work pants and a sweatshirt. It was wonderful.
Oh, wasn't it? 73, especially considering yesterday we topped that at 102. Just a reminder, we dropped 50 degrees in 14 hours. 102 at 2:30 p.m. yesterday, and then we dropped down to 52 by 4:30 this morning in Denver. Pretty sharp front for this time of year. In fact, one of our biggest temperature swings in the summer months on record. A high of 73, coolest high temperature since May 27th here in Denver. And maybe another more striking number. High of 73 in Denver, right? Look at that in Leadville. What's going on here? Leadville, of course, America's highest incorporated city. 79 degrees at 10,100 feet. Why was it so much warmer in Leadville? The cool air mass was shallow. It could not travel up and over the mountains, so considerably warmer in the mountains compared to the eastern plains. We see that in the winter. Not super common seeing that in the summer months. Now, we've got a lot of smoke. Now, there's a double-edged sword, right? It was obviously much cooler, I think, for most of us, Kyle included. Pretty refreshing today, but it came with a lot of that wildfire smoke. Today, we kind of doubled that smoke because we got a push of Pacific Northwest wildfire smoke from the north and west. And also, the Widemouth 2 fire, that's the one burning in southern Utah. That is supplying the majority of that smoke from the west, and that doubled in size yesterday. So a ton more smoke moving its way through Colorado. It'll gradually fizzle out tomorrow and into Thursday, but we're going to probably keep at least some smoke around through the rest of the week. Tomorrow it starts to warm back up again, upper 80s, and yeah, kind of getting back to not quite blowtorch level, but, well, if you like the cool weather, maybe just this might be the part of the program where you just, I don't know, just don't look. Just you know, head down like that for a second because it's going to be near 100. for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Just an isolated storm on Saturday. And then next week, if you're looking for a bit of optimism for rain, next week, looking a lot more active along the Front Range.
$19 million later, your micro-giving through Word of Thanks is still going strong. Tonight, we go back to the beginning, week 1, the first time we took a chance on your generosity. Hey, a reminder, you can catch this program streaming each night, 6 p.m. wherever you watch, and next is a podcast where you find those. Next turns 10 years old tomorrow. I can't believe we're still on the air either, but you just keep watching for some reason. Just like you have continued to keep giving to our weekly micro-giving campaigns, which started on a random week in June of 2020. It was the lockdown period of the pandemic. We were all stuck at home, but everybody still wanted to help people. I said that we would keep going with weekly giving as long as you kept giving, which is how it is a tradition now 321 weeks and counting. Today we caught up with Eric Lazari from the Civic Center Conservancy, the very first nonprofit you helped.
If you spent time in Denver, you have some personal story attached to Civic Center. The park is in the first phase of the Civic Center Next 100. It's being led by the City and County of Denver, supported by the Conservancy, and it is really reimagining the park and evolving the park for the next several generations of Coloradans and Denverites. The park had just experienced the George Floyd movement and the protests that happened here in Denver. We had seen lots of protests come through Civic Center, as they should. This is the place where protest happens. But we had never seen it expressed like that. One of the expressions the protesters used was really putting graffiti over the historic structures. There was some physical damage to some of the stone, but really the park, to most people, it felt trashed. I got a call from Kyle Clark. He called me at like 10 o'clock in the morning, if I remember it correctly, and said, we've been toying with this micro-giving thing. And I'm like, what do you mean by that?
We're starting a new project here on Next Tonight. We'll begin each week with a word of thanks. Civic Center needs tens of thousands of dollars worth of professional cleanup. There's a small nonprofit called the Civic Center Conservancy. It cares for the park. So let's clean up Civic Center Park for people and for parties and, yes, for protests. We can do it, us, right here, tonight.
We didn't know what to expect. Sitting in my kitchen that night, scrolling as donations were coming in, because I was getting an email every single time.
A week ago, we started a new project here on Next. You raised $90,000 and covered the cost of cleaning up Civic Center Park.
We got to be the first when this was just an idea. What has always made Denver and Colorado great is our spirit of working together, and Word of Thanks has empowered that. I don't know if anybody imagined what it could become today.
About half of the 300 plus nonprofits that we've featured here have been a direct result of your suggestions, your nominations. It's not complicated. Just shoot me an idea and why you feel passionately about it. It takes 2 minutes. Just go to wordofthanks.org, wordofthanks.org, and fill out the form. Marilyn, I see that 2020 footage, and the first thing I can see is the hair. My wife had been cutting it with the dog clippers for like 3 months.
Good. I thought she did a good job.
She lost the lines.
Okay.
She lost the lines.
Okay.
Back with your feedback next. Lots of feedback on the jacket tonight via text. I've got a few straw hats, and if you can sing bass, if you want to start a barbershop quartet. Roger in Marion Littleton says, we put that gem you're wearing into Google Lens and it said the image is a Canali sport coat, likely made of silk and cashmere. You're either making too much money or lost a big bet. Which is it? It's not Canali, folks. No, this is a really cheap jacket. I've got one Canali. I got it used on Facebook or on eBay. Charles in Lakewood says, holy blank, you're 42. I feel old. 10 years ago we started.